Hiya. So yeah, for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Ellie. I am co-convener of Youth and Student CND, and I live in Whalley Range. So me and Sam, as Pam said, have recently come back from. Thank you, Sam. If you didn't know who Sam was, we went to Barcelona in October to the International Peace Bureau's World Peace Congress. So there was a group of us went from CND. There was myself and Sam, Mark Soames, who, if anyone is on National Council, might be familiar with. He was down in London, and Bethan, who is General Secretary of, is that the right title, Sam? Of CND Cymru. And Lucy Tiller, who is also co-convener of Youth and Student CND. She was going to come, but later couldn't come, but she helped us in the early stages of it. So a good kind of group across various elements of the UK, which is lovely. And a really nice element of this, I think, as well, is, as some of you may know, so me and Sam were part funded by a contribution from Greater Manchester CND, which was hugely appreciated. Mark was part funded by a contribution from London CND and Bethan from CND Cymru. So there was a really nice financial support from across the regions as well, which was great. And then the rest of that was topped up from the Youth and Student CND budget, which is provided from National CND every year. So it was a really good opportunity for us to go and not kind of, I think it opens the doors for a wider range of people to be able to come to these things, and maybe different voices than usual if you're able to kind of have that financial backing. So a huge thanks to Manchester CND for that. So the conference itself, I feel like I was thinking of how I could summarise it, but I have the leaflet here, which summarises it very well. So the goal of the conference is to bring together vast swathes of civil society, from peace and disarmament advocates to feminist and LGBTQIA+ campaigners, ecologists and climate activists, anti-racist and Indigenous peoples, human rights defenders and trade unionists to generate a unified response to the anxiety of our times. As you can tell, that is quite a wide range of people. And I personally found it incredibly refreshing to kind of have that full range of going to sessions that did link in how peace and disarmament generally linked in with human rights and with the climate crisis in particular, which is such a huge issue for our time. Yeah, so I think that was definitely a good highlight for me. So the apologies if you can hear, by the way, it is so windy outside and my back garden seems to be a trap for it. So if there's any background hum, it's that. So the conference itself started on the Friday with a kind of youth focus section. So the youth network within the International Peace Bureau met beforehand, which was really good, kind of gave everyone an opportunity to meet each other from all around the world, and then meant that later on, when the whole conference opened, we had these really valuable kind of relationships of people we knew we could go and talk to during the conference, which was great. And there was a few people in particular who we kind of kept meeting up with throughout the conference, which was Nico from down in London and Fonda, who is in Vienna. Am I right, Sam? I don't know. But
I think she lives in Brussels.
Brussels, but yeah, a really lovely kind of opportunity to have people to check in with at various points throughout, which was great. So yeah, and then once the main conference kicked off, I think the range of speakers was absolutely incredible. I'm trying to, it feels like so long ago, October, but but we had a good range of sort of plenary sessions where everyone came together to listen, and then individual sessions, a nice kind of hybrid element as well, because obviously COVID, but I think everyone was really pleased with the amount of people who could be there in person. And personally, I think having not had the kind of opportunity to just sit down and spend good time with other activists, I find that quite sort of nourishing, I think, which was good. Yeah, that's kind of vaguely about the conference. I don't know whether, Sam, if you've got anything to kind of add on the conference generally. That was kind of my kind of key takeaway.
Yeah, I share the the sense of meeting people across borders, which felt really exciting in light of the COVID and also Brexit. I found it really intriguing to speak to people committed to nuclear disarmament that don't live in nuclear armed states, and talking to them about why they were committed and how they acted in their campaigns compared to how we do in Britain. And those kind of new experiences, there was particularly one in a workshop about depleted uranium by a Greek activist talking about the TPNW and how different their perspective is on what nuclear weapons are. And in terms of those nourishing experiences, it just kind of deepens, I think, or has deepened my relationship with what we're doing. I went to workshops on peace education globally, where we heard from Young Moon in South Korea. It was chaired by Alan Roy, who's the head of the Movement de la Paix. And through that, Beth Ann and I have been starting to collaborate with two French peace activists. So those valuable ways of starting to meet people, I think, was really exciting. And we also went to deliver a workshop, which was on the second day of the conference, on the Saturday, which was about intergenerational activism and organisation and how to communicate across different experiences and different generations, which was I found a really exciting way for the group of us that went to work together and find what that was for us. One wonderful thing that came out of it, which was, I won't say too much about the structure of the workshop because I would quite like us perhaps at some point to do it as Greater Manchester and District CND. But we spoke to various different people, including our very own Jackie Burke, to provide small videos about their experience of how to, say, write an open letter or organise an A to B march, or in Jackie's case, the role of art and culture to keeping a movement alive, and a really exciting way to reach people in different parts of the movement. I thought it was a sort of successful intervention. We had people in from Vienna, from Madrid, from Berlin. Tom Unterreiner, the chair, also came from up C&D, of course. So the sense of meeting people and also working together that the conference provided really gave us a really strong amount of time to talk about what youth involvement in CND can be, and where hopes for the movement can go as more young people start to think about what disarmament is in relation particularly to climate catastrophe, which was, I don't know about you, Ellie, but really the thing that sort of came up all the time from younger activists. How do we link environmental concerns and disarmament together? What is peace and climate justice together? I've got the appeal actually here, which was written up as a conclusion of the delegates from the conference. And here we are. The warming of the planet endangers life for untold millions. The environment, the foundation of all life, is being destroyed, burned, poisoned, and exterminated. Civilization is in danger. 14,000 nuclear weapons threaten humanity's existence, and with heightening tensions between big powers, the day of their actual use is increasing, while $2 trillion in weapons spending kills each day. With their massive daily death toll, small arms are weapons of mass destruction. We cannot tolerate or be complicit in these daily realities. So one of the exciting things also for me was to see the way that Indigenous rights and Indigenous political movements were really centred in the way that the conference was going. That we could really really place concerns about land, about language, about culture, about peace, about justice from so many different angles. And that was really exciting to see. And I definitely think something that will inform, I think, the way that the group that went, will be working for peace going forward. And there was one last bit of this, which, and also just very quickly, because I saw she came in just as we started, Ray Street, Ruth Verlau from the International Campaign for the Abolition of Uranium Weapons says hello. And at the conclusion of the conference, nice thing that happened was Beth Ann and I were lightly cajoled by the rest of the group to join someone that works in the International Campaign for the Abolition of Uranium Weapons to go down in her van from Barcelona to Granada, where Nadine is living. And we had a sort of nice day trip and got down. We ended up sleeping in the van on a gay cruising beach, actually just outside Valencia, which is quite funny. And then got down to Granada and went to the Alhambra together and then came back. And it was a really exciting opportunity to spend a couple more days talking to people about peace, and we're still very much in touch. And I thought what excited me about it was that it's the sort of thing that could only really happen in the peace movement. If somebody, frankly, in the Labour Party, or I didn't really know, said, do you want to get in a van for 2 days and come along to where I live in Granada, I probably would have said no. But knowing that this connection had been forged out of peace activism felt the right step to take. So that was another lovely thing that came out of it in terms of building youth internationally that are committed to peace. I think the very last thing I'd like to say is the Russell Einstein Manifesto is quoted in the appeal from Barcelona. And it says, "We appeal as human beings to human beings. Remember your humanity and forget the rest. If you can do so, the way lies open to a new paradise. If you cannot, there lies before you the risk of universal death." I quite liked hearing some of the old stuff coming back a bit. So yeah, that was sort of my thoughts on the conference. Ellie, is it what is it now? Is it what's come out of it?
Yeah, let's go for that. Yeah, that's been. I feel like everything's intermerged, but it's good. So I'll give a bit of an update from kind of what's come out of it from a youth and student CND perspective. So actually no, because I think personally it's worth checking in on that side of things, because I think for me it definitely widened my perspective of peace activism. I think it's quite easy to get bogged down in British politics because, well, we know why. And I think for me personally, to kind of leave the country after lockdowns and everything, and then just go and meet all these wonderful people and these incredible activists from all around the world, and affected communities and just people who've just been campaigning for years. It was just, I think for me personally, it was very nourishing, and I've definitely returned with a good kind of renewed energy, I think, to carry on with this, which I think at kind of times, I think it can bog you down a bit at times, and then you have to kind of build yourself back up again. But I feel built back up again in my activism, which I think is lovely. And I think that's kind of evident in what has come out of it. So last year, Lucy, who wasn't able to join us in the end going, but did help us with the kind of foundational stages, she set up Youth for TPNW, which I've now joined as fundraising lead. So it's a group of young activists kind of from around the world, from various different groups, all uniting on the TPNW. There were focused everything on that, just to kind of just to make sure that everyone kind of unites on this, and we have perspectives from every different, so many different continents. So we are running a youth-focused conference alongside the Member of States Parties UN event in Vienna, which is due to take place in March, but I think is going to get moved to July, to make sure that at this UN conference that there is a youth voice there and heard. So we're going to run our own one and then make sure that we have a paper that comes out of that is read in the civil society presence of the main conference. And I think a big part of me getting involved in this was going to Barcelona, because it kind of made me see this international perspective that I think when you've only kind of been stuck in the UK for a little bit, and I think of all of my activism's only ever been in the UK, I think sometimes it can be difficult to get that perspective. So for me, yeah, it definitely renewed a kind of, an energy towards an international perspective. Yeah, so that's kind of from that side of things. From like Youth and Student CND in general, me and Lucy are continuing to be co-conveners, but I think there's a good kind of, we're sort of paving the way, I hope, of the future people to come. So we've got our AGM is going to be in February, I think, where we'll hopefully get a new committee of youth activists. The kind of intention of that is that I'm pushing the boundaries of youth. So I would like, it would be good if someone younger and more relevant to Youth and Student CND was able to kind of pick that up. And I think through kind of the outcomes of the conference and kind of what the effort that we've been able to put in, I think there's a good foundation there for getting a really good network and a really good team of people together to work on Youth and Student CND, which is really exciting. I think I would be so happy to be able to pass it on to another to a whole new committee would be absolutely wonderful. Yeah, and I think that's generally my elements of what's going on now, and I know Sam's got some other little bits to update on that as well, or big bits to update on. Out of
spending a sustained time together and talking about the history of CND and talking about what are the values of CND for young people now. Bethan Sian in CND Cymru and I are working together with another young person who lives in Clwyd and CND Cymru to start to organise a march against the small modular reactors that they're proposing to put in the decommissioned power stations at Trawsfynydd and Wilfa. That really came out of discussions about all the different ways and different approaches that CND can take to work towards peace and disarmament. And also that has come out of us reading Left, Left, Left by Peggy Duff, which Tom Unterreiner sent to Bethan and I after meeting at the conference. So another sense of something that's come out of a relationship forged there, and just having the time to sort of sit and talk. We all know that it's a tough subject to talk about with people that aren't for nuclear disarmament sometimes. So spaces like that conference and what's come out of it, and things like today, where we can really go at it in depth, are really valuable. So I guess I would like to say, and I'm sure Ellie would as well, that thank you very much for the sponsorship that went through Greater Manchester District, and I think it's very fair to say from my perspective that it was so helpful and has really provided something new to start some new things going. Anything else, Ellie?
No, just very much that. Just a huge thank you. I hope it does come across quite how beneficial it was, I think, for both of us, and the lovely relationships that have come out of it. Just a big thank you.
Okay, well that was excellent, and people are clapping, literally and visually. I watched people's faces light up as you talked about the actions that are being planned, including the march. Now, we'll talk probably a little more about that this afternoon, and if not this afternoon, then probably at our very first co-ord. But that was an extremely good presentation. I'd like to thank you both very much. 3 phrases came out for me, and I'm going to suggest, as we open up for discussion, that you raise your hands, either with the chat hand, the virtual one, or the literal one, and I will do my best to note the order. And we've got something like now 35 minutes for open discussion. For those of you who weren't here at the absolute beginning of this, the chat is on, but I'd like you to put your questions by raising your hand, because I won't be reading the chat today, but co-ord will save it and come back to it as an agenda. I mentioned 3 phrases. The 3 that stood out for me were nourishment, that you felt nourished by the interaction with others, and intergenerational work, and the climate catastrophe. And then the joint statement. And I think it would be very helpful if a copy of the joint statement, if you have it electronically, could be shared with everybody attending this meeting. And if a copy could go onto the GMDCND website. Perhaps at some point this afternoon, if it's available electronically, we could screen share it. It's such an exciting statement. But what I'm now going to do is shut up and move into questions and answers. I need to try and get everybody into a gallery view, so bear with me. And right, yes, I think I've got most of you. So please put up your hand, either virtual or literal, if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question. Lydia. You're muted, Lydia.
I'm not.
Oh, no.
Thank you very much, Sam and Ellie. I'm so delighted that you didn't just get nourished, you actually came up with a plan. And to gather people around you while there's still an appetite for marching, I think the idea of the march to Wilfer is a brilliant one. But what I would like to know is, when you were talking to people across Europe, did you collect some experts? Did you find the people who are doing the research into the technology of these new flat pack small nuclear power stations? Because I happen to have bumped into somebody who's working on the safety mechanisms for them. And he feels that it's going to be all right, until I pointed out that he wasn't involved with the waste, and what was them going to do about it. We're going to have to face quite a lot of opposition from climate activists who are being told that small new nuclear that can go up more quickly than the Sizewell monster, it will be the answer. It'll be local to them and they can have more ownership and all that sort of rubbish. So I'd like to know if you've picked up any expertise, and if you haven't yet, shall we have a sub plan that is about gathering that expertise so that that's behind you and you're not confronted by people who say, but what about the unions, etc.
Sam, do you want to, this is a bit more your...
Yeah. Yeah, I think we met lots and lots of different people with different specialisms that were running workshops. across a whole manner of thing. I mean, Julia van der Walle, who works for the IPB in Berlin, also works in corruption, the arms trade work. So lots of people like that. And I know that Beth Ann went to a workshop around fallout to do with testing and accidents, nuclear power station accidents, and is starting to get in touch with those people for us to form what we're calling the Facts Committee, which there will be an open invitation out for members to get involved with, where we want to exactly nail down the exact consequences and reality of what SMRs could be doing. It's going to sort of work on two levels, I think. There's going to be a local groups through North West Wales and a CND-led committee with the aim of producing a pamphlet in English and Welsh about SMRs in North West Wales, but also the waste management side of it. I know she's speaking to someone in Vienna, who lives in Vienna, about SMRs. But I think there is a sort of deliberate obscuring of the facts and the reality of them. And I absolutely agree, Lydia. We really have to sort of pincer that and make sure that it's very clear, the realities of management, and also the decommissioning of them. Because if we learn anything from the wave of nuclear power in the 50s, surely it was, how do you decommission these things? What's left behind? And they claim that they can just be flat packed back up. Do we know that for certain? So yes, we'll hopefully be working a committee which will be international, I think, in some way, even if it is England and Wales. But that's what, we will definitely be working towards that committee. Yeah.
Just to add on to that a little bit as well, I definitely think, and similar to what you put in the chat about sort of, I think young people, especially when you're particularly passionate about the climate crisis, and you're kind of faced with all this greenwashing from companies about how nuclear is a green and ethical option, I think there is a lot that we need to do to kind of counter the money and the effort that's being put into selling nuclear as this green option. But one of the campaigns that Youth and Student CND is going to sort of go with in the immediate future is looking at how nuclear weapons and nuclear energy intersects with the climate crisis, with a big focus, I think, like Sam was saying, on correcting those, getting the facts across. But yeah, I think that kind of seeing how that interlinks with the climate crisis is really, really important, and not letting young people be swayed by the kind of everything that you see on television of people looking for, with their windmills and then the nuclear power stations next to them, which it just doesn't make sense. But thank you for the contribution.
Thank you for that. I just noticed Ray's hand go up. Another 2 questions, please. Anybody else want to come through after Ray? Linda, right? Ray, Linda. Anyone else at this stage? No. Well, over to Ray then. Thank you.
Oh, thank you both for that presentation. I just loved it, because I remember how I used to be inspired years ago by meeting internationally, where you meet people who are on the same wavelength as yourself. And so that was brilliant. Thank you for the reference. I didn't know you'd been to the DU workshop, Sam. That was fantastic. Because Ria had wanted me to be there, but of course I couldn't go. But I'm glad you met with that wonderful group. Did you meet Ramfred too?
Yeah. Yes. Those two led the presentation, and then
Ramfred and Ria did it together, didn't they? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's yeah. And I am interested that you're. One of the things that's come out of it is this march against SMRs, because I've been speaking and writing about that for a bit, and we've actually got a resolution you see on the agenda. But I think, are you in touch then? You must be with Ian Fairley. because he's written a briefing against SMRs, and he's our vice president in CND, and our, you know, the representative, and he's also CND's briefing itself is very good on the facts. But it'd be good to bring out another one, that it coming from Youth CND, I think. And I've asked that the next thing we do on nuclear energy from Greater Manchester focuses on the trade unions, because I think that's one of our big problems, because the GMB supports nuclear energy. And of course, they always shout, whether we're local or national, jobs, jobs, jobs. And, you know, we've got to prove to them that there could be jobs in sustainable energy. And we've also, as you said, got to combat this idea, the greenwash idea. Yes, I agree with you, Ellie, that young people are so bothered about climate change. And it's actually, the facts are wrong. They are carbon emitters, but you hear politicians go on and everybody else saying we can only reach zero if we have nuclear energy. So that it's good that that's one of your focus, and I'm so glad you're doing it, and I'm sure that we'll be supporting all the way along. And I hope you can stay on the call for our nuclear energy resolution and discussion. Thank you.
Okay, now next is Linda, and then Kath is putting her comments, I think, into the chat because she can't turn her video on. But we can hear you, Kath, I think, can we? I'm going to come back to Jenny in a minute, but Kath, can you speak to us?
Hopefully, can you hear me?
Yes,
Pam?
well, I'll bring you in. I'm gonna, it's Linda's turn. Then we can hear you.
Right,
So
I'll just mute myself and come back later when you
yes,
call me.
I'll bring you in due course. So it's Linda, then Jenny, then Kath. Okay, over to you, Linda.
Well, thanks very much, Ellie and Sam. that was brilliant, and it really took me back to the times I used to go to all the International Peace Bureau events all over Europe, and it's always so energizing to meet with people from different environments and cultures, and so amazing to find that some of them get support from their governments. Very different scenario from here. But more recently, in the last year, as Chernobyl Children's Project, I've worked with Jackie and Nuclear Free Local Authorities and Linda Pence-Gunter in Beyond Nuclear to organise events, online events around nuclear power. So we did the first one around Chernobyl and nuclear safety, and then we did one about nuclear's impact on wildlife. But we've just started planning one now on nuclear power and the climate, to really try and impress upon our supporters the importance of linking with all the climate issues, but hopefully to get through to the climate movement. I'm sure most people in the climate movement probably think nuclear is not a very good idea, but most of them don't really think about it much, and they don't think it's important. So our three targets really will be climate activists, unions, and young people. And Linda Pence-Gunter has just found two brilliant young speakers on nuclear power. One's in Poland and one I think is in Austria. So if we can get them involved as speakers in this meeting, then we want to really try and target young people. So I hope that you'd be able to help us spread the message about that, get lots of young people in Britain, probably in Wales particularly, and some of your contacts across Europe as well. So it's really exciting, all the contacts you've made and the enthusiasm you've got. And I know Linda Pence-Gunter's got a lot of expertise with herself and her group about SMRs as well, so you could probably tap into that.
No, that would definitely be up for getting people to the meeting and supporting it. Sounds great. I think the more one thing that struck us talking about Wilver is it's closer to Stoke than it is Swansea, and it's closer to Dublin than it is Cardiff. and the sense of building like a local, but also like a kind of, this is an international thing and it goes across borders and the same problems are occurring in other places. Building that sense of a wider network, I think, is really, really important. So, you know, definitely be up for doing what we can for that meeting. Yeah.
Could I just add, in response to what Lily's just put in about financing, that's also going to be a major focus of this. The enormous expense and waste of money in nuclear and how that needs investing in renewables.
I think we're going to have an email going out soon to the Youth and Student CND database about the AGM. So if you want to, if you've got anything that we could put into that email, I'd be happy to share that.
Pam, are you okay? Do you want to bring Jenny in? Or shall I? Jenny, do you want to speak now? We seem to have lost Pam.
I think Pam's put herself on mute.
I'm sorry, that's my fault. I brought in Jenny, then Kath, then Anne. So over to you, Jenny.
Yes, so I'll just add my thanks to Ellie and Sam, and I know how exciting it is to be at these international gatherings, and it's great that you've been so energised by it. I just wanted to pick up on one thing that Sam said, and then another question to you. You know, Sam, I think you said something about talking to someone from Greece, and you know, how they had a different perspective on nuclear weapons. I hope I haven't misinterpreted you, but if that's right, I'd love to hear more about you know, what you thought those different perspectives were. And the other thing that I want to ask is on the question of, you know, what from the conference did you get anything on, you know, how best to promote disarmament, nuclear disarmament issues in the amongst the climate activists, and how to make the connection between climate change and nuclear disarmament? Because for me, I think it's you know, really about the question of international cooperation rather than you know, the kind of situation that we've got ourselves into with Russia and China at the moment, and how important it is to actually be, and I mean, you know, even on when we look at the pandemic, you know, the pandemic really has been taken over by the corporate pharmaceutical companies, and it was an opportunity and should and has to be pursued through a global perspective and you know, global cooperation. So I'm asking, you know, whether you sort of had the opportunity to develop any ideas on how to make the links between disarmament and you know, the need for addressing climate change. And in that also, I was arguing in IPB that we should be developing links with people in Russia and China. And I just wonder whether there was any people speaking about the Russian and the Chinese perspective at that conference, because if there was, I think that that's absolutely invaluable and hopefully eye-opening. Thank you.
Do you want to reply to that, Ellie or Sam?
So I think Ellie is probably better suited to talk about the relation, as that's what Youth and Student is working on, the warheads and power and the environment. But on the point of the woman from Greece, it was in the workshop about depleted uranium use and how that has the cancer rates and the poisoning of the environment in Kosovo of the 1999 bombing. And it took a detour into the TPNW, and it was very interesting to see someone argue for nuclear abolition simply on atrocity, purely on nuclear weapons are an atrocious aberration, and they're controlled by a small number of states, is utterly wrong because of the devastation they can cause. And it's just fascinating. And the TPNW as a vehicle to shame the populations of nuclear armed states into action. And refreshing to hear someone that perhaps doesn't have to relate it to the logic of nuclear weapons, the compulsory nationalism of nuclear weapons in nuclear armed states, questions of cost, just to see someone argue from a simple point that if you dropped a bomb, bye-bye. But also kind of to try and get over to her that shaming people, shaming a populace, I mean, is not as effective as we would hope. And it was fascinating to have a kind of conversation with her, sort of in the English and bad Italian that we kind of both shared, about what the moral stance and what working in the context of a nuclear armed state is, and what works and what doesn't work. And personally for me, how the TPNW has to be something that brings people with it. It can't be used to shame people, and kind of driving the wedge between the nation state's desire for the nuclear industry and a growing sense of the populace that that's not where we should be going. She, to be honest, she found us, myself, but the kind of way of, the way that we work sort of not particularly radical. And I had to say to her, the terrain when you live in a place with them is very difficult. And the way you go about it is different. So that's what the conversation was about with her. And on the point of Russia and China, I didn't meet any delegates from either. It was a largely European and African delegation with a strong component from India and a number of activists from Latin America. And that was sort of the makeup of the conference internationally.
Thank you. Ellie, did you want to add anything?
Only just, and I can't even entirely remember what the second part of the question was. Was it around how best to relate climate crisis and nuclear weapons on energy? Yeah, okay. I think well, also very much all of what Sam's just said, but just to add on that a little bit, I think one thing that was really helpful, I think, to me, and something that came across incredibly powerfully, was giving a platform to affected communities, whether that's communities affected by climate crisis or affected by like uranium mining and that kind of thing. So I think anything that, if we're able to do that, and I think like definitely when Youth and Student CND has been planning events in the past, we haven't kind of had that global focus, but also I think now that we're all totally comfortable with having people appear on Zoom screens and that kind of thing, we don't have to physically have someone in a space. I think being able to give a platform to a range of voices of people who are genuinely affected by things in a real and physical sense, I think that can be incredibly powerful. And it reminds me, I think London CND did a really good nuclear weapons and racism thing that kind of looked at the way that Indigenous communities have kind of been affected by weapons testing. And yeah, so I think one kind of takeaway of the effectiveness of linking things in, I think, would be to elevate voices of people who are like deeply physically affected by this kind of thing.
Okay, thank you for that. Cass Tribuch, I'll bring in now, please.
Thanks, Pam. I'd just like to thank Ellie and Sam. Like Sheila said in the chat, I think they've not only enthused us all, I think they've encouraged us at the beginning of the year, certainly me, who's been away from the fight for a while, to really get stuck in and try and make a real difference. So I really thank you folks for that. Many years ago in Manchester, and I'm sure Ray and Pat and Linda will remember this, perhaps some other friends as well, we had a peace conference in Manchester, and we had people from Utah, I think it was. We had people from the Western Shoshone Nation. We had people from other communities in Utah, and they were all affected by the devastation of uranium mining in that area. And any community that was downwind of the uranium mine, those were communities, every single family had at least one person who had died from a very unusual cancer. And it seems to me to be lost in the annals of time. We talk about nuclear waste, which of course is the big issue in nuclear accidents, but we seem to have lost sight of sorry, I'm losing my voice, the uranium mining, which is not carbon neutral, it's not limitless, it's not sustainable, and it's causing huge issues for the communities that live in and around the uranium mines. And I just wondered if that was brought up at the peace conference in Barcelona.
I think that was one of the sessions you went to, Sam, but I don't think I went to one.
I think Bethan went.
Oh, that was the one. But it was, I think, speaking was Doug Weir, who Jackie will know, and maybe some others, appeared on a big screen, but I missed him, unfortunately. But it was spoken about, but it wasn't.
It was covered. That's good.
Yeah,
That's
so it
good.
was the session that I went to.
Pat, I've noted you. I want to bring in Anne now and also say that we have 9 minutes. So while it's great to hear people's perspectives, keep them brief so that we can get in as many as we can. So the next person is Anne and then Pat Sanchez. And Papa Giorgio, are you still there? Oh, you're muted.
I hadn't asked to speak.
You put your hand up at one point. You didn't?
No.
You must have just been waving idly.
Right.
Okay, that's fine. Never mind. Pat, thank you.
I just wanted to make a comment about the commonality between the Extinction Rebellion climate activists and our nuclear power and nuclear weapons, that a powerful argument is our common humanity, and that there are victims on both sides. The climate activists talk about the millions of people who will starve, who will be displaced, who will drown, who will suffer from heat exhaustion. And of course, with nuclear, we have the victims of Chernobyl, of Fukushima. You know, we're hearing that young victims of radiation who have thyroid cancer in Fukushima are taking the government, taking TEPCO to court. So there are common links. And if we go for the human links, you know, with the depleted uranium, that also was a powerful argument that we used in the depleted uranium campaign to wake people up to the effects of depleted uranium toxic remnants in Iraq or wherever they've been used, or on the workers manufacturing them. So I wondered if there was some strand there that we can use to unite our campaigns to get more joint working. I know there is an XR piece, but both movements are so important, and if we've got to look for what can unite us. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna, just a little comment on that was just that Youth and Student CND had a meeting towards the end of last year that Sam, you were also at, talking about the climate crisis, and there was someone from Extinction Rebellion would sort of come and wanted to be involved. So I really hope that they'll come to future meetings too. I can't remember whereabouts they were, but they seemed like they were very involved with Extinction Rebellion in their area. So I do think there is a really big overlap in kind of enthusiasm that I think that's a good route to pursue.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to contribute at this stage? There are one or two people who haven't spoken yet. No? Okay. Well, I said I wasn't going to look at the chat, but I have. And Jenny has just commented that hopefully we'll have some time to talk about the current international situation with herself and Ray putting in their penneth. And yes, of course, that will come this afternoon. After the apologies, I hope that my chair's remarks, which will be actually noted, I think we'll move into a discussion and then deal with the formal business. It's 11:55 now, if nobody else wishes to ask any more questions or make a point, I'll just ask for any last callers. No, okay. Well then, I'd like to thank Ellie and Sam very, very much for that brilliant report. And people are clapping, and that's excellent. I think the themes that you touched upon as I said, you know, it being a little different if you live in a non-nuclear state. That the perspectives become very clearly the perspective that these weapons are simply an atrocity, as I think your phrase was, Ellie. You've given us plenty to think about in the year ahead, and plenty to think about as the conference in Vienna comes towards us in March. We know that some of the European countries have now at least agreed to send observers, so that we will have some work to do to seek to persuade cloth ears in number 10 that it's in the UK's interest to send an observer. I don't expect that to happen for 1 second, but we can at least raise our voices. So I'm going to say thank you again and close this section and invite you to log on again just before 12:30 for the formal part of the AGM. So just show your appreciation again in the usual way.
Thank you very much. Yeah, cheers.
GM Tech, do you want to close us for half an hour?